Is there a reason no one seems to mention Hwan Bae when it comes to this outfield mix? Good morning to you. Good Wednesday morning. I'm Dejan Kovacevic of DK Pittsburgh Sports. And this is Daily Shot of Pirates. Which comes your way bright and early every weekday if you're into football and or hockey. I also offer daily shots of Steelers and Penguins where you found this. In the time that I spent at Pirate City this week, one of the players I'd set out to have a good talk with, not even necessarily a formal interview, just get to know him, find out how he thinks, how he functions as a baseball player. It was going to be Bae. He is my big swing vote, if you will, in this lineup. I see Bae as maybe the best equipped player to take advantage of Major League Baseball's many new rules going into this season. The pitch clock, the bigger bases, the maximum two pickoff throws that a pitcher can make. You're allowed to make more, but you got to get the guy out or he's automatically awarded. So it's a maximum two. And it doesn't take much to look at Bae's numbers just from the 2022 season, beginning with what was a strikingly quick adjustment to AAA ball in Indianapolis, where he batted .289 with a .362 OBP and a .430 slug. That slug isn't going to get anybody super excited, but the .362 OBP will. Absolutely. So will, by the way, when you add them all up and come up with a .792 OPS, 180 total bases in 108 games for the Indians. Why does that matter? Well, he also had 30 steals on 38 attempts, 48 walks. You see where I'm going here. He cut down on his strikeouts, which were a bit of a problem for him at the lower levels. And he even, for good measure, hit 8 home runs, had 23 doubles and 6 triples. So it's not like the bat was lacking pop. He wasn't Punch and Judying the ball everywhere. He could hit it. He could really hit it. And that earned him a late season call-up to Pittsburgh. He only appeared in 10 games, but there were 37 plate appearances. And here again, the adjustment was just like that. Batted .333, .405 on base percentage. Same numbers. Basically the same numbers as AAA. Again, just 10 games, 37 plate appearances, not a big deal, but an .830 OPS. And all of this, mind you, was obviously before the rules have gone in, since they're only just about to go in. I hope you have a chance to check out the column that I've got up on DK Pittsburgh Sports this morning. Can't miss it, right on top of the site. It's a thing that I do every year where I go around the clubhouse and survey players, especially the veterans. Especially when I say that, I mean veterans, players who've been there a long time and who would know not only the major leaguers in camp, but also a lot of the prospects. And I ask them to pick a breakout guy. Someone who maybe, we haven't been paying enough attention to, but someone who could just rise up and surprise a lot of people. Last year, Brian Reynolds, for this column, picked Jack Suwinski. I didn't even know who Jack Suwinski was. Kind of nailed that one, huh? Well, I won't spoil the column. I hope you can go check it out. But I will throw in that Bae was somebody who was mentioned by a couple guys, including Reynolds, as maybe having a candidacy for this because of the rules. He could steal who knows how many bases. Did you see him run the base paths in that short time he was up in Pittsburgh? He can take advantage of that shift. He can take advantage of that quick pitching clock. And he could turn that into the kind of player, let's be honest here, that we haven't seen not just in Pittsburgh, we haven't seen in baseball in a long time. I'm not saying he'll be one of the best, but I'm just talking about that type of player, someone with those characteristics. They've almost been driven out of the game. The art of just hitting the baseball where they ain't, the Tony Gwynn, Rod Carew, Wade Boggs model, the Freddie Sanchez model, if you want it locally, that's gone from the game for all intents and purposes. And it could come back. In fact, if Rob Manfred has his wish, it'll come back in a big way. The Pirates, in my opinion, didn't do a whole heck of a lot to adjust to that. The free agents that they brought in, for the most part, still fit the 2022 mold. Carlos Santana, Ji-Man Choi. But if this kid can make his own imprint on the lineup, it's going to end up being a big deal. A lot bigger than what some might realize right now. I did talk to him about this. I wanted to get his feel on this. I don't know him well at all. His English is plenty good enough to converse, but I just hadn't really had the opportunity. So on this one, I wasn't sure which way he'd go. Like, if he'd get defensive, like, what do you mean I'm a different kind of player? Or if he would say, heck yeah, I can't wait. Well, guess what? It was the latter. And he got real specific about the ways it would benefit. He gave me these really, really intricate scenarios in which he could take advantage. He talked about how many times a baseball that came off his bat went up the middle. Would have been a hit, should have been a hit. How many times he went the other way and was disappointed. He said, these are his words now, you're going to be back to having 3 holes in the infield again. That's how it's going to feel, he said, for me as a hitter. And for him, as he'd continue, if he gets on first, he's got a really, really good chance of being on second. So you can almost take that slugging percentage that I cited and kind of toss it out the window. Because if you reach first and then you reach second without any assistance from the guy at the plate, that's no different than a double. In fact, it's arguably a little bit more effective and more annoying than a double, certainly to the other team's pitcher and catcher, both of whom have to adjust to you being on the base paths with their hands more tied in that regard than ever. Do you see where I'm going with this? This is fun. This is neat. This is something that wasn't in play last year other than for 10 games. That's the kind of stuff I'm looking forward to in 2023. When we come back, J1Q. This portion of Daily Shot of Pirates is brought to you by our friends at North Shore Tavern. That's directly across Federal Street from PNC Park. It's home of Steak on a Stone, an eating experience, underscoring the word experience. The steak is brought to you partially cooked on an 800-degree stone, and you do the rest. It's a ton of fun, it's a great meal, and it's a baseball atmosphere like no other in Pittsburgh. North Shore Tavern, right across Federal Street from PNC Park. Today's J1Q comes from Ryan Porter, who asks, if Kutch and some of the other veterans do well over the first half of the season, which player or players could you see being traded? Ryan, I don't know. I have a different feel, and maybe, not going to lie here to you, it's because of being around them for part of this week, for getting that first-hand sense for their excitement, but not only why they would, just because it's spring training, be all geeked up. That's common everywhere. It's been common before each of these past 2 seasons, both of which ended up with 100 plus losses. But this is different. That's why I'm going to try to make an effort through this spring training to share little bits and pieces like what I just did in the first segment regarding Hwan Bae. Because I'm giving you now something that's specific, that's substantive, as opposed to just saying, yay, Buccos, or whatever. I want you to know why it is that they're excited. You might not agree with it. In fact, you might think, they're ridiculous or they're subscribing to PR or whatever it happens to be. But I'm going to first answer your question by saying that question isn't something that would be on anyone's mind down there, not even in the deepest, darkest recesses. So for me to say which player or players could I see being traded, that's probably the most accurate answer that I can give you as for what it is that they're thinking about and the way they're approaching this season. Now, here's where you're going to just roll your eyes and maybe even just hit pause on this podcast permanently. But when they had their big team meeting, the annual team meeting that they have in the cafeteria at Pirate City, everyone speaks from the owner on down. Bob Nutting took his turn, and he told the players that the way they are approaching this, the way they are going to talk about it in every context, is that now's the time to start winning. I'm waiting for you. Okay, are you done? All right. Okay, cool. I mean, I know what kind of reaction I'm going to get when I say stuff like that, but I'm still sharing with you everything that comes about. Derek Shelton had the microphone a little bit later, and he said something very similar. He said that's what we're about right now. It doesn't mean that they fancy themselves as being contenders, but they do see themselves as being competitive. And they do see themselves as being in a position where they can now take the field, not have to use it as some sort of training grounds or tryout camp for every bleeping waiver guy that's available. They can now take the field with 9 guys, a regular old starting rotation, and a competent, maybe better than that, bullpen, and compete to win that game. If they do that, Ryan, and here's going to be the best answer that you'll get to that question. If they get to that point and they can be competitive through the first 2 months, a lot of stuff's going to look very different in June. Now, that doesn't mean they're going to throw the old guys out or whatever else here, but there's a lot of different roles that certain pitchers, especially the pitchers, can get moved into when a Quinn Priester arrives, when a Mike Burrows arrives, when a Luis Ortiz arrives, in addition to the 5 starters they've got here already. You can think some of the same thoughts as related to Andy Rodriguez, Henry Davis, Leo Verpagero. So the first 2 months, yes, they'll answer your main point. Okay, if they're a complete disaster, then yeah, okay, obviously. You trade out Carlos Santana, you trade out Ji-Man Choi, whatever's required. Rich Hill, somebody would want him. But that genuinely isn't the mindset. And I'm also the one who was telling you each of the previous 2 springs that it very much was the mindset. In fact, they'd even talk about it openly, meaning that you would move the vets at the deadline. I appreciate the question. I appreciate everyone listening to Daily Shot of Pirates. We'll do another one of these tomorrow.